an aspiring educator who believes that teaching can shape and impact a student's life at various levels. She completed her master's in English and two diplomas in French and creative writing. She is an avid book lover who reads classics, fantasy, self-help, and children literature. She is also an artist who does journaling, painting, and sketching in multiple mediums. Besides, she writes poems and book reviews on her Instagram page weekly. So this was Sushma Rani. Sushma, are you there? Sushma?
Yes, Lavanya.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
One second, I'm just uploading the presentation now.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and hello to all beautiful people of Hydra and the college. Hope you are having a good evening. Um, I'm just uploading the presentation now. Just hold with me for a minute.
Yes, we will.
Why Christopher Marlowe, out of all great hundreds of classical writers, is because I thought when I have to inspire my friends out there to pull up the classic books and read, I thought we have to speak of an author whose works are great, but also whose personal life is also so interesting that we could connect to them. So I thought Christopher Marlowe's life is kind of heroic, not in a heroic way, but in a kind of flimsy way. And I thought you all people can get your adrenaline juices going and feel curious about him because he's full of.
Sushma, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit louder or just hold your mic a little bit closer to you?
Yeah, sure.
Now it's good, yes.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Okay. So I thought he will be the perfect choice for you all to get that curiosity going, to hold your interest, where he can lead you that suspense, thriller, mysteries and all through his works and also with his personal life. So on that note, I'll start with his personal side more. So when we go to his childhood, he is born in England and he is particularly born in Canterbury to a shoemaker. But his birth date was not revealed yet. Like, it was not revealed at all when he was born. But he was baptized around February 26. So we can assume that he may be born few days ahead. So that is the only possible official record we have. Why I am mentioning this, at the end we will be having a little connection to another conspiracy, so I'm just putting it right now. So after that, he went to King's College, King's School, and then he went to Cambridge University to study. He did his bachelor's, master's. But what's so special about is that university itself hesitated to give master's degree to him, thinking that and doubting that he might be a Catholic or he might be willing to become a Catholic priest. It's not so bad right now because we have this right for religion, but at those times of 16th century, there is a royal announcement from Queen Elizabeth I that if any English citizen who actually become a Catholic priest is against rules and will be criminalized. So the university thought he might be doing that because he is not attending classes and he is being more in the religious gatherings of Catholic side. So they thought he might be against church government, he might be against the royal government. But then Privy Council of Queen Elizabeth I intervened the issue and suggested they should be bestowing him with a master's degree, and that actually he is beneficial to country and also to the Queen. Privy Council is like a group of members. In secrecy, they give advices to Queen. It's like a little parliamentary meeting or a kind of a little council for the Queen. So when private council intervened into the issue, it's then they didn't disclose everything what he does with the Queen affairs, but they had disclosed it. He is beneficial to country and to the Queen. That made them believe that he might be spy to working with the government, and that's why he is not able to attend colleges, and also he is able to afford all food and drink that is beyond the expenses of scholarship. He's poor, he's from a shoemaker family, but he could afford luxury, and then they figured out he might be a spy. So at the education level itself, his life experiences were quite interesting and a little mysterious. And when his education completed, he then came to London to begin his career writing, to produce lots of great literature. In aspiring to produce all that, he came to London and started writing for stage performances, but not for publications. Because at that time, plays were very, very, very popular, and they had been getting lots of attention from Queen and audience, from the citizens too. So he started writing for them, and his first work was Dido, the Queen of Carthage. But it is not his solely first work. It is actually in collaboration with Thomas Nash, and it's a very tragic love story. So it's like Dido is the queen and he loves a man, and she loves a man, but he doesn't agree, and then she falls in depression, and then she commits suicide. In short, this is the story. I don't want. He wrote actually 6 novels and 4 to 5 poetry books. I don't want to speak lots about them because it would be very interesting if you read it. All I want to speak now or tell information about him on his works is to give you the inspiration to pick him up and his other friend pals, and also to read his works because they are quite really interesting and curious. So this is his kind of collaborative first work, and next is Tamburlaine the Great, and this is the marvelous work that even still people feel in awe with, because it is the first work of his stage performance. This is the second work he wrote solely, and then this is the first stage performance work of his life. And then this book is written in 2 parts: Timberline the Great 1, Timberline the Great 2. This book solely revolves around the life of Central Asian emperor named Timur. Now, just to give you a very quick glance on the plot, Timur is actually a shepherd. He doesn't have any land or any fame or even treasure or anything. But then he loves the princess of Egypt, and then he starts getting into the fights with generals, and then he wage war against them. He makes connections to popular figures at that time, and then he wins wars one after the other, becoming the king and then emperor, and he invade lots of countries like Turkey, Africa, Egypt, and his sole purpose is to invade and conquer as many lands as possible. It's like the reality king like Alexander the Great, similarly to him. And in that invasion, he does anything. Even if it's violence, he does it. Even if it has to kill the women, the children, the citizens, the innocents, he doesn't care. All he does is he invades, and if they are ready to give up the country, he'll be fine. If they are ready to wage a war, he will. And he has he built up a capacity of his army in a way that he can win any war against anybody, and that till his death, all his successes will be praised and glorified with again bloodshed on par. But what is special about this book is, for the first time, Christopher Marlowe has introduced blank words. That means unrhymed iambic pentameter. That is a very big thing at that time. Like if we do something, we feel like that's a big thing right now we are doing. It's a it's a big deal. So that is a big deal at that time, introducing black words into the play. And all his works, above all his works, only Timberlane the Great 1, Timberlane the Great 2 were published. All other published posthumously after he died. So, and in this, he studied the theater at that time while doing bachelor's, master's, and also when he came to London to work at theater companies. He did a major study at them and understood what audience were seeking for. Just like how right now the directors or producers look for what audience is looking for. And he understood they are looking for some action, some violence, some bloodshed, because it's at that time it's all about monarchy, wars, and battles. And then he introduced violent and sensational fiction in his works, starting with the Timberlane the Great, and even it follows bits and pieces in other works of his too. And in this work, it's rich of language, like even if it's a vocabulary, even if it's the sentences, phrases, formations, everything is spectacular, like intellectual complexity, the way it's framed. And the book is divided beautifully. Like the first part is till he marries the princess, and second part is till he dies while leaving the sun. And Timur is mostly a bad person to me personally, because he doesn't care emotions much, and he all do is the bravery. He wants to show that chivalry and bravery, wanna be tough, stubborn, that person, and he only becomes soft when he is with the love of his life, the princess. So he gets 3 sons in the second book, but he kills third son when he is very sensitive. He doesn't want to be in the war. 2 sons are very good. They follow the father blindly. They are stubborn. They are firm. They are willing to do anything, whatever his father says. But the third son is very sensitive. He wants to stay behind. He doesn't want to be on war land. This all creates lots of sadness in him, mostly anger in Timur, and he kills his son when he hides in a tent, not coming into the war. So he's really brutal. And how a person, the human emotions, the complexities of it are also shown beautifully in this book, and the sensitivity of the person, the weaknesses and strengths, and that taking advantage of by the other person, everything are beautifully portrayed in this book. And if anybody are like really good at this Game of Thrones or those kinds of things, action with some history, this would really serve them well. And the next book is The Jew of Malta. He wrote 6 books, 6 novels. So we discussed 2, and this is a third one. This is a very, very, very funny one. And it's not a very funny one, but I find it funny because the way the protagonist Barbas behaves is very stupid, and that creates the comedy to the reader. It's a revengeful story in Prior, and it revolves around the protagonist Barbas and his daughter Abigail. In short, Barbas is a Jew who lives in Malta, and when the governor of Malta has to pay lump sum amount of money to other governor, he keeps a ordain, like he gives out a rule that the citizens had to pay a certain amount of money so they could collect, and in whole they can pay to the other governor so that there won't be any war or bloodshed. But Jews had to pay a little bit more. There were many religious conflicts, disputes, and these are discussed in this book, showing and reflecting in the characters and their actions. So in this, Barbas is a Jew and he rejects governor's orders. He's a very, very greedy person. He's very rich too, but he doesn't want to give up money. So he openly criticizes the idea. And when governor gets angry, he says, I asked you a part of your share, and then you are being very greedy and you're rejecting the government's order. So I will be taking whole of your property, and now you will be stripped out of everything, every property, every treasure you had acquired till now. Abigail is a very sweet girl, so she doesn't get affected much about anything with all of this thing. But when Babas is stripped out of everything and is, pulled out of his house and everything, he wants to take revenge now. From there, the story starts, and it's only fun. It's only not good that he goes to any extent to create troubles and to create, lots of bloodshed, even emotional bloodshed in the book. For example, he asked Abigail to dress up as a nun. These are Jews, and he asked her to dress up as a nun because all his treasure, few of the gold coins he had, he didn't give to government. He hid it in the house, and then he wants Abigail to go and get it so that they can start all their life all over again with riches. That house was turned into a church school. So Babas asked Abigail to dress up as a nun and go and teach there, and every night get some coins. So if you do that for a few weeks or few months, we can acquire all the gold I had hidden, and then we can fly away from Malta and lead a new life. From there, Abigail doesn't feel rightful of it and doesn't do. After a certain point of time, she stops stealing from the house, and he gets angry and he kills his own daughter. And then there will be a servant to Babas, and he will also be killed. And many characters, two priests in the characters will be killed. Even the governor has to be in a lot of mess of revenge, murder because of Babas. The one man will create lots of troubles to many other people, even the other country prince, just because he wants riches or he wants gold. Instead of just obeying the rules, he creates all that mess around. And at last he will be died in a very funny way, like this governor and other prince takes their revenge over Babas, and Babas dies at the end, which is rightful. But the whole point of in this whole point of revengeful story, religious conflicts are majorly discussed, mostly between Jews, mostly between Jewish people and then Christians. Those conflicts are beautifully discussed, and how a person can change again. Human emotions were again completely beautifully portrayed. The servant does brutal works, but then he changes because of a woman. And Abigail, the daughter, also changes. There is more change of character will be there in the book. Except Babas again. Babas doesn't get any realization at all. He acts like he does, but he doesn't at the end. So there will be lots of that, and the story is pretty interesting, how he uses people, how he tricks people. He's a trickster basically. So how he tricks people, how he says stupid stories to people just so that he could get money or riches, or fool people, get into power. It's all with the greed. So those kinds of human emotions, bad and good, are beautifully portrayed, and we can always take good from that. And the next book will be Dr. Faustus. It's a very, very classic book, and I really love it. And why Dr. Faustus? It's whole book is about his tragic history of life and death. What happens with Dr. Faustus? He is a very, very, very renowned person in the book, but he's knowledge gives him greed. When we are growing, when we are acquiring knowledge, we get many ideas and different thoughts, and it's only a matter of how we differentiate it, whether it's a good thought or a bad thought, good idea or a bad idea. And we talk to lots of people too, and only matter is what we hear, what we take in. So when he speaks to colleagues and all, many people give many kinds of ideas, and one idea is he's not just a doctor, normal, physician doctor, but he's also a kind of magician doctor. So one of his colleague gives an idea like he can summon too. So why he is not using the powers of that? And then one day he feels he has to, he feels powerful with all the knowledge he had, and he summons with his magical powers a demon named Mephistopheles, and then he wants that demon to be his servant for 24 years. And what Mephistopheles does is he says he's already a servant for Lucifer. Lucifer is a prince of hell. These are all from hell. So he says, if you can get permission from Lucifer, I don't have a problem to be a servant for you, a human. A demon is servant for a human. So then Dr. Faustus makes a contract with Lucifer that I am a very knowledgeable person. And Lucifer also thinks, okay, Dr. Faustus is very knowledgeable person. If he is in hell, I can use his knowledge, to get a brilliant ideas to implement in future. So he agrees to leave Mephistopheles for 24 years under a contract to him. And he says after 24 years, Mephistopheles comes to hell and be his servant again. And also Dr. Faustus' soul has to come. And that's the deal. No matter what happens, like he gets into accidents, whatever, it doesn't matter. After 24 years, your soul belongs to me for eternity, not just for 10 years again. For eternity, your soul belongs to me, because Lucifer thinks Dr. Faustus is very valuable by soul and mind. He wants to use him. And not knowing that, not realizing it initially, he agrees to it and enjoys all the riches he can get by tricking kings and rich people with the help of Mephistopheles. And he enjoys everything, like women, riches, fame, and he goes to any place. And if he doesn't know what to do, one thing or something, he asks the demon to do something because he knows magic. And at the time when he's nearing his contract, he realizes he's going to hell and how torturous it will be. And then it comes to him that he could have been nice. Again, the self-realization kicks in. And he makes lots of attempts to plea for God, to plea for goodness and all, but nothing happens. He is doomed in hell at the last. But how he will be so desperate to not to go to hell, it again reflects the desperation of human actually. And in this book, in all this, the language will be again very rich, and this it is all very for visual reading. It is very good because when there is a contract, he sees the sign of blood on his hand. So it's like a very fantasy movie if you think in that way, if you read it. So it's very beautiful. And again, there will be a question of morality in this book. And he does lots of bad things when he has power of demon. And he rejects religion and God initially. And it's like he's an atheist basically at that time. And then scientific inventions were mostly portrayed in this, like at stages of the books, because he also does this magical things at stages, and then all the scientific inventions were represented here. And this lust for wealth and power, to control the wealthy persons and to get the fame and to feel powerful above other humans is portrayed. And the individualism, right? Before, there used to be clusters of people feeling themselves as a family, group or team before, because they want to survive from the world, or they want to survive from attacks. But from this work, the raising individuality of human is portrayed, how he feels he's enough, to live, to survive, and he doesn't need any human contact, because all the book only Dr. Faustus lives with a demon, not with any other person. I mean, he contacts many persons. The story involves lots of people, but when we look closely, Dr. Faustus and the demon are the only two characters who always talk to each other, and that's it. And the very important thing is, when this story was performed on stage at that time, first time the Mephistopheles has to be appeared when he summons through a spell. When it appeared, whole audience in the front seat, second and third, were terrified, it seems, because these kinds of theater they haven't watched at all. These kinds of plot stories they haven't watched any time, and it was the first time. And even though they heard it, they thought like it would be normal, but appearing like it's a magic. And how the magician dressed, that means our Dr. Faustus, how he dressed, and how horrific the man was who acted as a demon, was also very lively. So the audience were really terrified. I mean, it created a kind of uh, buzz around London because of this work, Dr. Faustus. And the next work is Edward II. It's a very historic play. It revolves around the life of Edward II. He's a gay, basically, but he doesn't disclose it. He doesn't say he's homosexual out in front, but he behaves the same. And because of that, how he trouble not only himself and the people, but also whole reign, like a whole kingdom. He keeps people at threat because of his connections with other men. So all this will be discussed in this book. This is a very plain book. It's nothing adventurous, but it's a historic play. So if anybody are interested in homosexual topics or around the history of England, this book serves a good cause. And the next is Massacre at Paris. This is again a historic play written by Christopher Marlowe. It is based on the real events that happened at 1573. So what happened at Massacre at Paris is that 3,000 Protestants were killed, including the king there. So that's really a massacre. And when it happened, it kind of served as a warning to Elizabeth I in England, because she was a Protestant too, and they thought if some religious matters goes the same way as in Paris, there may be massacre or any revolt of religion again in London. So there is nothing fictitious here. I mean, maybe little tint of fiction may be here, but mostly it's loosely based on the events of 1573 that really happened. So it's also related to history and massacre, mostly bloodshed. So I say it's a very good book. Rich in language, definitely, but there won't be any complexities in the plot. As per, it's very plain. What you know about the massacre, you would be knowing in depth. If you want to have a good research on massacres, why these revolts are happening, why innocent people are getting killed, or why these kinds of things are happening. Like if you are anti-revolt and you want to research, this will serve a good cause, but as a curious reader, this doesn't serve that purpose, because it's a historic play. So all the 6 plays are done now, and he had written 4 to 5 poetry books too, and out of 4 to 5, 2 are very good. That is Hero and Leander. He had written. It's a first poetry book that he had written. So it's nothing fancy. It's just a love story and a retelling of Greek poetry. The only funny part I felt is, I don't know how many of you people feel it, but I felt is, here hero is not the hero. Hero is the heroine and Leander is the hero. So that's the only funny part. It revolves around these 2 people. how they fall in love with each other, and how they connect or how they communicate, because they live at different shores. In between there will be ocean, so how they communicate, will they be together? So it's just a love story but written in a poetic form. So the next is The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. um, it's by Christopher Marlowe. Mostly it is a pastoral beauty. That too, the countryside of London, England, is beautifully portrayed, just like, you know, for nature lovers, this poetry will be beautiful. The verses are nice, but this poetry book is very famous for its opening lines. Per se, come live with me and be my love. So those lines became very popular at that time, and I think even now people use it. So those lines are like very popular, and those are the opening lines of this poetry book. And as title says, it's very clear here that the protagonist is a simple shepherd, and he loves a woman, and he writes his feelings and his desires towards her, asking her, wooing her and all. So that's all his works are. And I think you people have got a clear clarity of it. I don't say very depth in clarity, but at least a little. I don't want to talk of all the works in depth, because every work is very vivid and very brilliant in its own way, and I want you to people to read it. So I just highlighted what are really interesting, or what can be highlighted as a plot. uh, three to four books are really excellent, like Tamburlaine the Great, Dido the Queen of Carthage, or um, you know, the Dr. Faustus, Jew of Malta. These four books are like excellent books. I thoroughly ask you to read four, and the rest are your personal choices. And why personality of Christopher Marlowe now? Because Christopher Marlowe is a very mysterious person to people at that time, and also to the people of now. Even the scholars or the professors or literature lovers couldn't understand him completely. Who is he? What is this man? And from the works, he had written, and he doesn't have any, we didn't find, at least like till now we couldn't find any personal journals or any data. But from the official records like baptization, or like such official records like college education, like such official records, and from his works, people kind of sketched his personality. So we call it like Marlowe myth. Is still like, who is Marlowe? Like, is he this? People again say may not be. So the first is atheist. His people speculate him to be atheist because, as I said before, in Dr. Faustus and he openly rejects religion. It is a big thing at that time, because there were many religion wars going on, and religious disputes were happening. If you speak against church itself will take kind of action against you. You can't be against God. So you know that how it will be. And he spoke openly in his works. So people believe he's atheist, but at the same time people say may not be, again because at that time, Cambridge University, people doubted that he may be becoming Catholic priest. Again, we don't know what it is, but there was a doubt. So people think maybe he is Catholic. So we don't know much about from his works, because most of the writers keeps their heart and soul and their opinions, what they want to say, what they want the world to be heard. They speak all that through their works, to leave behind what they believe in. So in that way, if we think what he wrote is he, then he must be atheist. And people also think he's a spy, because he has been absent for many of his classes, like most of the classes at his schooling or at his education at universities. And also Privy Council intervention made people believe that he was a spy. And then he was so homosexual, because he never not true again. I mean, I am not sure completely. I mean, people are also not sure. But again, there's a speculation that he is homosexual because he never married, and he makes collaborations with male writers more. And also, he wrote a book about Edward II. Where the king is gay, so people also speculate he may be homosexual, but again we can't claim anything, and he didn't disclose anything out openly because again all these things at that time take lots of courage, and more than courage, it's a death wish to outwardly speaking all that. So he might not have opened up, or maybe he is not at all, he's just a regular human too. And that he's a magician because all his life has been in a suspense, and he does seem mysterious, and then for all that people also call him he's a magician too, like real magician, not just doing tricks at parties, but people think he may be a real magician, maybe party trick magician, but a very 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 what do we say, excelled at it, like he can even does anything that may seem like off for our whole lifetime, but he does it in a second. So that skilled at magic, trick, if we know it's a trick, but very skilled at it, that people at that time believed it's sorcery and all. So as a personality he is this, but this is all a moral myth. We can't be sure whether he is this, he is that, but through books he had written, and people call magician too because of this Dr. Faustus thing. There is a lot of sorcery in it, lot of magic in it, so people also believe maybe he is into this, that's why he could produce that big of a masterpiece. So that is his personality, which is again a myth, we don't know. And next is his death, which is very suspicious and mysterious. He died at very young age, at 29. I think he started writing novels. He came to London when he was 23. So just in span of like 6 years, he wrote 6 novels and like 4 poetry books, and he died at 29. But we don't know like what's the cause, like why he died or how he died and all. But there are again many conspiracies. People never documented his life. Many writers we know are like very authentic because we found authentic sources for that, authentic documentations for that. For Christopher Marlowe, there are no authentic documentation. Nobody couldn't document his life because he is a very private person in general, and also very mysterious. And few of the conspiracies around his death are like very, if you are silly, if you are like very serious. One among is like he got into a fight, the two over a bill at a bar, and in that he got stabbed into the eye or by a sword at a dagger, and then he died there. Another conspiracy is that he faked his own death. Why he could fake his own death is because, again, as we know, he was a spy. He might have made some wrong moves, that leads to treason, and then criminal charges will be veiled on him. So to escape all that, he may be sentenced to death too. So to escape all that, he faked his own death and then just flew away from the screen, from the screen of that murder site, or from the London. And another conspiracy is that Queen herself may have thought he is against religion, he is against government, he is writing books with radical thoughts, so maybe Queen herself ordered to execute him for treason, or the church authorities attacked. So there are many possibilities of his death, but nothing has been documented, so we never knew for what reason he died. But he died on 30th of May. And another this I kept in a different slide because this is very, very interesting. People say the thing that we had discussed before, like the second one, fake death to escape his criminal charges, and he changed his name and identity forever. He escaped from the scene, he fled from the scene, and then he changed his name and identity completely to become a new person so that he don't get any charges. And what is very interesting here is that he changed into people believe. It's not like it's 100% true. I just want all the interesting facts about this author to be out front, so you feel curious about him, and that is Shakespeare. People believe Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe are both the same, because they both were born at the same time. He was born at February 26, and Shakespeare was born at April 26 in the same year. So there is only a slight difference of 2 months older. So people think maybe both are same. And when Christopher Marlowe died, Shakespeare wasn't famous at all. After he died, Shakespeare got famous. So people think he led this life and he left it, leaving his name and identity, and then became Shakespeare, and again gained his popularity because he has been popular since childhood. People even believe that. Theorize it. And another thing people strongly believe is the similarity between both portraits. People somewhere thinks both look little similar in personality features, the facial features and all. But we are not sure because we never have seen them. But people believe it. And maybe because of the...
Sorry to interrupt, but I think we are running out of time.
Yeah, it's the last one. Yes, it's the last one.
All right.
Sure. But people, sure. And people believe he is because when he died at 29, obviously we will all be so young. And when he became Shakespeare, as he will be in 30s and 40s, we aged and we won't be looking the same. So it's a very... there will be very ease in changing our identity completely. And there is a similar theme in the works, both of the works. For example, there is Jew of Malta from Christopher Marlowe's side, and there is Merchant of Venice from Shakespeare. And again, there will be Edward II here, there will be Richard II from Shakespeare. So there are many similar themes from here to the Shakespeare. So people believe that maybe in real all these are true, that they both are the same. And in fact, even Macbeth, Dr. Faustus is very, very, very bad about power and revenge and not revenge, power and fame and riches and all, and even Macbeth is the same. So people believe there are many similar themes and similar titles too. So maybe thus his mind is still alive. So maybe both are same. And the amount of works, for 6 years of his writing life, he has produced 6 novels and 4 poetry books. And whereas Shakespeare also produced 38 plays and in his lifetime, that means for his long life of writing, he produced those many. And whereas for his short life, he produced short. That means they work. They dedicate work completely to the writing, and they produce massive plays. And the themes, the main images of both works also. There will be violence, there will be monarchy, there will be emotions again, there will be bloodshed, revenge, tragedy. So both are same again. So people believe, sometimes, not all people, but sometimes there will be speculations that maybe both are the same. And at that time, it is easy to change, trick the identity of a person. So whom we are claiming as Shakespeare, maybe a Christopher Marlowe, or both are the same. So we never know. And yeah, that's it by Christopher Marlowe, and he is admired and revered by every. Despite all these facts, whether we know about him, we don't know about him, whether he is homosexual or spy, or apart from all of these things, writers then and now, everybody revere and admire his genuinity of work, authenticity of his work, and the new forms he had introduced in it. And for that, when he died, many authors had paid tribute through their works. For example, George Peele had written Marley Muse's Darling, and Ben Jonson had written Marlowe's Mighty Lion, and Shakespeare also paid tribute. Again, which people who believe this conspiracy argue that Shakespeare, no, because he himself is Marlowe, so he paid tribute. If he doesn't pay tribute, maybe people believe he couldn't pay tribute to himself because he know he is alive, so he paid. If you understand what I mean. So people think that may be true. And how he paid tribute is he quoted lines from Hero and Leander, few lines in Shakespeare work As You Like It. So that's how he paid tribute. And yeah, and even today many people admire his works, and still many people study his work, and he's a very excellent author in my opinion. Throughout all his works, many traits of human natures are discussed, portrayed beautifully. The confusion, the tug of war between two people or two emotions is also beautifully portrayed. I think that's how the author leaves their legacy behind, and I think he did quite a good job, not only writing his work but also making his own personal life very adventurous. So yes, thank you for staying with me till the end. And yeah, if anybody have questions right now, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Any questions? Girls, any questions for Sushma?
Okay.
Minute. Okay, there's a question from Tanisha. Where the elements of Renaissance present in Christopher Marlowe?
Yes. What are elements? Okay. We can say there are elements of Renaissance in Christopher Marlowe works because there are lots of enlightenment in that. There are lots of self-realization in that. So of course, I say there are elements of Renaissance in there. But I don't say it's completely the work of Renaissance. You know, it's he's part of Elizabethan age, and but he explored what all he could in making. One second. In making his works enlightening, self-realizing too, and the elements of Renaissance were hidden in there. So I believe it is yes. And the next question, Austin or Marlowe?
It's from Mehboob.
Yes.
Mehboob, yes.
Yes, both are brilliant in their own way. Like the themes they speak are totally different, so I can't really argue about it. Both are excellent authors, brilliant too. She speaks totally for women and about marriage, courtship, you know, individuality, or everything about women and love. Whereas Marlowe, he speaks in general, you know, in general for humanity, individualism, realization. I think both are important. Love is important, realization is important. So both are brilliant authors. Okay. Thank you, Tanisha Mantri. We have time for only one book of Marlowe. Which book should it be? Wow. I say Dr. Faustus because it's really adventurous, interesting, curious. What all adjectives we can give to it, we can give. So I say Dr. Faustus. But if you can push a time a little bit, Dew of Malta. These two are non-negotiable to me. Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you
Is there
so much,
anything?
Sushma. It was a
Thank you, Lavanya. Thank you all for holding up with me and coming till the end, even though there were even though there were little troubles. I mean, technical glitches at the beginning. Thanks for holding up. Thank you so much, Lavanya and everybody, girls and Hydra members, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great evening too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sushma, and thank you everyone for staying with us till the end. I think we conclude the session. Kanika ma'am, over to you.
Smriti ma'am. There's a question for Smriti ma'am.
Oh, there's a question for Smriti. Okay, yes. Tanisha says there's a